Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be continuing our King's Indian attack run against d5. There's a few ways they could play. They could play some sort of knight c6, which looks like they're going to follow suit with that, and we're getting this reversed perk set up. And I'm going to go for c4. Generally, I'm finding that c4 is the better way to set up against this. So, that's what I wish to do. This makes things interesting. Bishop g4. We saw bishop d6, I believe, last time. So we could still go for c4 here. Or we could go for e4. Generally, when the bishop's on g4, it kind of makes sense to go for c4 instead. Does it not? I feel like it does. c4. If they go here... If they play e4, I really should probably look at these lines a little bit, you know? I think what I would do is I would take and then play knight g5. I'm not sure. Or maybe we castle. I should really spend more time in the opening trying to study before the games, but the whole point of this is kind of showing that you don't really need to. Let's play... Let's castle. Let's just see what they're going to do. We spent about a minute there. I feel like that is more than enough time, actually too much time. Now that they played this, I feel a little bit happier about c4. Because when everything's said and done, it could potentially hit the bishop. And we get our d4 structure. Again, I should look at the complications of e4 a little bit more. But I'm pretty happy here, because generally one of the biggest things you want to do here is, for example, go b4. Can we go b4 here? If b4, bishop takes b4, we could go queen a4. We could also go a3, but then a5 is played, making b4 harder to play. Is that such a big deal? We got to figure it out. That's why we got to calculate. b4 is a very tempting move. You'll see this a lot in the Benoni structures. And again, whenever we play c4 and they play d4 in the King's Indian attack, count that as a Benoni. So there's a few goals we have playing b4. Trading off two pieces, one of the three pieces that can touch the d2 square, minor pieces that is, not the rooks or the queen. Those wouldn't hurt either. And yeah, those are the big things. I would love to be able to take here, but it's just not quite possible. Something like queen a4 is kind of interesting me, because I think that actually supports b4. But the thing is, bishop d7 could be annoying. Let's play a3. Very natural move. They'll probably play a5 as a result. And there's a few ways we can continue. One is by going queen c2, c4, and knight c4. That's always possible. We could also try rook b1 and b4 anyways. We do have to be wary that there could be pawn sacrifices involved with this. But that's okay. Generally, in these positions, sometimes sacrificing is really good for us. As long as we keep our light squared bishop, it goes crazy on the diagonal sometimes, which would be nice. We'll have to see what they play. I'm going to drink some water really quick. So this is probably the worst thing they could have done, allowing b4. I think b4 generally, if we can get it in, we're extremely happy. For example, I'm looking at c5, kicking their bishop back, and then something like knight to c4, right? Also, it gives me an extra square for my pieces. Yeah, so here I don't hate c5. And after bishop e7, I can play knight c4 and attack this pawn, which does look frustrating to deal with. I could also go bishop b2 first, making sure that there's no e4 problems. in the position. So when I go c5 and then knight c4, e4 doesn't work because d4 hangs. I mean, technically it does hang anyway, so c5, bishop e7, knight c4. If they try something like bishop h3, of course that doesn't work, but if they go e4, I think I can take it. Knight takes, and then d4 does not hang, actually. It is sufficiently defended. So let's play bishop to b2. Maybe I shouldn't have. Actually, the more I think about it, that's probably a bad idea, because that depends on them playing e4. I really should have thought more of like, are they going to have to play e4? I think probably something like c5 I should have just played anyways. And the idea, which we might actually see something similar anyways here, is that I'm really happy about bishop h3, I think. I'm just going to put it like that, because I think maybe moving their knight somehow would have made sense to play some sort of f6 here. Now all of a sudden, if they play e4, I take, and d4 is loose, and I think that's definitely something that favors me. All right, so let's take that. Knight g4 doesn't really do anything. I think we can just take that happily. We have to worry about any like knight e3 checks, but they're just not a thing. So knight e3 check. If they could somehow get it, that'd be really cool. And I think they might think that they're tactically defending e5. I'm not sure. One thing they have to worry about is after knight f6 or knight h6, doesn't matter. We take on e5. They go queen d5 check. We can block on f3, luckily. So we can take it both ways and go knight f3. And we're a pawn up. We're threatening d4 as well. This is a very comfortable pawn up as well. The only thing that we should worry about in this position is e2. If we win d4, things become a lot easier. And it looks like we've just won d4. So there's two ways I can do it. I can take, and then I can take, or I can just take on d4 immediately. I want to go materially minded. I've been telling you guys to just follow the material, follow your hearts, you know, all these things. So I got to take it, right? It is forced to take it. I mean, 2 pawns up, this is extremely good for us. I have moves like e4, bishop e3, and d4 coming. I'm just going to get that huge center. I would like to put my bishop on e3, but it doesn't also make sense when my bishop's on, you know, blocking my e2 pawn. So playing something like e4 lets me move my bishop back, essentially. That's kind of the idea. And I can also consider taking on f6. They don't end up letting us, but that's okay. Yeah, once they move away, then we can either play e5 or we can play bishop e3. Like, let's just say queen b7. I think that's a natural move, just to keep contact with this e4 pawn. We can play something like bishop e3. And remember, these are our 2 extra pawns, right? Extra pawns. So rook d8, queen e2, I think, rook d1, and we can play like e5, d4, or we can try to maneuver somehow, playing like, this might sound weird, but let's just give them a few moves here. Knight h2, I'm trying to find, let's just say bishop f8, and f3. I don't think this is actually insane, because now d4 becomes even stronger, I believe. Let's just say g6. I'm not saying these are good moves from black, but all of a sudden I feel like this adds extra power to our center. And generally, when you're up so much material, you can make weird kingside concessions like this. You don't want to for nothing, but there's a reason why I'm trying to here. It's because I'm trying to prove a point that 2 extra pawns is a big deal, especially when they're central pawns. Let's get into the analysis though, because we got to do that. We got to do it, my friends and family. So let's check out the lines and the evaluation of this position. So d3, knight f6, knight bd2, and after bishop g4, I was considering c4 here, and c4 does not pop up. And I think it's because of this e4 move. Correct, yeah. You never know when this move is going to hurt you or it's going to be okay. So it's just best to make sure you're being cautious. And I think castles is a correct call here. Bishop d6, and now c4 is appropriate. And the idea here is that after e4, it looks like everything's fine. After c takes, And the point is, after e takes f3, we can actually take with the pawn, funnily enough, because we are attacking 2 pieces at once, and we're regaining our material. And we're opening the position where they're underdeveloped. So that's a tactical justification there. So after bishop d6, generally, again, it feels like whenever you're castled, you're more likely able to play moves like c4 and justify them. But you got to do a little bit of calculation. So c4 was played, d4, and again, we get this reverse Benoni, which the computer might not like at first, but I do think this is okay. And now that the computer is like realizing, oh, this is actually fine. So funnily enough, a3 was what I was thinking and played. And also I mentioned b4, and I was wondering, can I play b4 immediately? b4 was popping up as the top move for a little bit here. And the reason why it would is generally because this is a common sacrifice. And I don't want to make that the justification for this move. I think that's a lazy justification saying, oh yeah, you see it sometimes in this opening. That's lame. We have to ask why, right? So the reason why here it's a good idea is because after c5, we are trying to distract them from the center. After, well, it says bishop takes f3, but let's just say bishop takes c5. And now we can take on e5. And we're opening up our light square bishop where black is underdeveloped. We're down a pawn, but we're very likely to win it back on either b7 or just be able to take advantage of their weird coordination here where their knight's only defended by their bishop, and their bishop's also undefended. It feels like there's tactical complications that could favor us if they're not careful. Like, if c6 here, it looks like maybe even a3 could be strong. Actually, knight takes g4 is also incredibly strong here, and then a3. And after knight a6, just bishop b2, and we have more than enough compensation for the pawn. Generally, I'm trying to avoid these types of lines where we're sacrificing stuff. I think that kind of destroys the point of this run if I'm just going for like some seriously theoretical line where we have to sacrifice things, unless it's like a sacrificial opening. Sure, you can in this opening, but I'd rather play things where we're focusing on material and just trying to get out of the opening with an okay position. So after d4 here, a3, and again, I think a5 is the only move, and computer completely agrees. And again, it's because what is white's strategic goal? And what is black's strategic goal, for all that matter? Black has more space, so generally when one side has more space, they should be focusing on restriction and keeping pieces on. The reason why is because, first off, with restriction, if you have not much to do and you have very little space, then the second part comes into play where, hey, if you have a lot of pieces on the board as well, they start tripping over each other. As we can see, all three of these pieces kind of fight for the same d2 square. This was mentioned in the last video as well, and this is why a5 is so strong. Because generally, if we can play b4, then maybe we can even play something like c5 or b5, and we can start kicking their pieces around and coordinating our pieces a little bit better. And this is kind of a bad scenario for black if they don't stop b4. And unfortunately, my opponent doesn't. They play the second best move, which is like, it's kind of funny that this is the second best, and it's already not a significant advantage for white, but definitely something. It feels like there's a pull after the move b4 here. Because again, we're threatening b5, opening the diagonal further. We're threatening c5, making this bishop a little less active with moves like knight to c4 coming, and things feel great. So after queen d7, I'm not happy with my next move, bishop to b2. I genuinely think I should have gone c5 anyways, and this seems to be correct. And the idea behind it is after bishop to e7, I was actually just going to go knight c4 here. There's also b5 actually. Again, trying to open up that diagonal is very, very effective. But I think knight c4 is a great alternative as well. So yeah, bishop to b2 is fine. We still have an advantage, but I feel like we could have done a little bit more. c5, bishop to e7, and again, this b5 keeps popping up, but okay, I missed it. I played knight c4. And even still, with maybe not playing the most tactically aggressive options for me, I think we can agree that white should be the one pushing here. And that's because although they did have more central space at the start, now all of a sudden feels like it's kind of biting them back a little bit, right? Like these pawns could be weak, especially the e5 pawn, which they end up dropping after knight g4, h3, and then taking the pawn. And of course, by this point, it's actually just lost because the central pawn, this e5 pawn, was such a big deal for black. And when they lose it, they lose a lot of restriction of our pieces, and our pieces just kind of come to life after that. Because now d4 is weak, and we can start targeting it, as we did in the game, with just moving the knight back, just defending the knight. Things just kind of play itself, and we end up winning. Hopefully that was instructive. Again, just a note, I would say the biggest things are whenever we're looking for a move like c4, we want to wait until we're castled, and then it's more likely to work. You have to look at the tactical justifications of things sometimes. You know, again, tactics should serve strategic ideas, whether it's the strategic idea of winning material, gaining space, getting a better position, or making even a pawn break to get activity. And then the other thing to mention was, again, you really have to focus on the restriction of your opponent in these scenarios. Whenever they play a3, a3 is not a nothing move. It is clearly aimed to play b4 without losing the pawn. And although we could have played b4 anyways, I'm trying to avoid that for now. And yeah, when we got b4, our position was just extremely comfortable, and it feels like we had a lot of margin for error and still getting a better position. And that was exactly what happened in the game. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.